So you from around here? What was that? Where are you from? Okay. Do you normally go to church anywhere? Okay. Well, must be stop by tonight then. Hi, I'm William. I didn't get to meet your, what's your name? T? Oh, I'm sorry. T? Very nice to meet you, T. Are you in the area or passing through or? Okay. Okay, great. Well, we're glad to have you tonight. Yeah. Did you get a lesson sheet? Okay, perfect. Hey. Hey. That looks for a preacher. All right, everybody. Well, we're going to get started here in just a minute. In the interest of time, we'll skip the song and just get right into it. I'll say a prayer in just a minute before Eric gets up here and gives us the class for tonight. We have one more lesson after this, right?
One, yeah, but you guys are supposed to help me with
That's right. So next week is the lesson that Eric is doing on community. So be thinking about that. I don't know if you've got the questions that
I do, yeah.
Okay, cool. So there's a couple questions that Eric's wanted us to all kind of be thinking about and reviewing. We've been going through like different areas or ways that Christianity fits our needs as people. Talked about a couple different ones. And community is one that Eric knows nothing about apparently. So he wants us to give him some ideas on that, has some questions prepared. So be looking out for that. We'll send out another email about that as well, and he'll have the questions up here as well. But I know that Anna's working tonight. Stephen is helping some family members who are feeling a little bit under the weather right now. Anybody else that we should be thinking about or praying for before you started?
Ari.
Who's that?
Ari.
Ari, yeah. Ari, who was baptized not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before. Definitely want to pray for her. All right, well, let's say a prayer and then we'll get into it. Father in heaven, we're so thankful for every opportunity you give us to learn more about you, to learn more about what you've prepared for us in your word. And I pray you'll be with our brother Eric tonight as he leads our thoughts. Help us to gain good wisdom from the words that he's prepared and from some of the studies and interactions that he's had with different people, Father. Lord, I pray that you will help us to turn to you to fill all of our deepest needs, and that you will constantly be our stronghold and our refuge and the thing that we cry out to fill us up, Father. Help us not to turn to the idols of this world. Help us to instead to point others back to you and to help them see the great satisfaction and peace that we found through you. Father, I thank you for Jesus most of all. Be with all those who we mentioned who aren't with us or who are sick or who are in need of spiritual encouragement. And I pray you'll help us to find ways to love and serve. I pray this all in Jesus' name.
All right, does everybody who need one of the sheets, did they get one? I think so. Got one more up here for whenever Blake gets here. Can you hand that to Blake when he gets here? Okay, so just as a reminder of what we've been doing in these classes, we've talked about 3 needs up to this point, and what we're doing is comparing the secular worldview to the Christian worldview and asking which worldview best serves the needs that we have. And I did want to ask you guys, with the needs that we have discussed, can you think of any others that would make a good discussion, especially when thinking through these things with skeptics? Are there any other things that you would add to this list?
There's the basic of spirituality and beauty and justice and those things that are, universal thoughts that come up.
Yeah, that's good. I was thinking about adding one also on being loved. We all have a need to be loved. That would be a good one. But that kind of fits a little bit with identity to some extent. Blake, David's got your... and so this is, as a reminder, the purpose of these classes, number one, to gain a greater understanding of our culture. How is it that our culture is thinking right now, and how does that help us know how to reason with people? Number two, confirm our own faith, that these things might be helpful to deepen our understanding of what God has done for us as we think more deeply maybe about some of the things that we wouldn't otherwise have thought about. And I think more Christians need to really consider, is my meaning really coming from God? Is my identity really coming from God, and morality and hope and community, all these things. So hopefully these things have helped us think more deeply about our own faith. And then thirdly, just provide a tool so that we know how to converse better with some of the people in our society today. So maybe those are some of the things that to consider about the purposes. But we've also been talking a little bit about the causes of skepticism. What are some of the causes that we've talked about?
Desire to sin.
Yeah, desire to sin. What else? Yeah, bad religious experience, hypocritical Christians, desire to sin. There's another one we've also talked about. And that's not...
Gnosticism.
What was that?
Gnosticism, the age of reason.
Yeah, good. So and that goes to the cultural background beliefs that we live in a society today that is more Gnostic in its thinking, that we've reached this kind of pinnacle of understanding since the Enlightenment, that human rationality ought to be able to give an explanation for everything, and if it can't, the problem is not with science, it's just that it hasn't discovered the answers yet, things like that. Tim's going to need a sheet. He just got here, so. Sorry, I guess I didn't have enough for today. Okay, so we got a couple extra. Okay, so what we've been doing in these classes is, given the causes of skepticism, which oftentimes they're emotional in nature and not because somebody's reached some pinnacle of wisdom. Given the causes of skepticism, what should we consider in reasoning with a modern skeptic? You're going to try to teach a modern skeptic about God and the Bible, and they've got emotional reasons for why they don't believe in God. What should we consider?
Should meet them where they are.
Meet them where they are, which doesn't always just mean, they got some question about how vicious God seems in the Old Testament or whatever. Yeah, sure, answer that question. But try to discern what's behind the question, what emotion is behind the question. And then show them that Christianity is more emotionally appealing. And even though you might think God is a moral monster, and there's good answers to those objections, the Bible actually provides good resources to be concerned with morality. For example, it makes sense of our identity and our meaning and our hope. And next week being community. But tonight's going to be the discussion on hope. But I want to put this up one more time. Next week when we talk about community, as you guys have gotten a kind of a flavor or a sense of how at least I approach these classes, we have an assignment for next week. I want you guys to be thinking in terms of what are some proofs people need community. These middle three questions are all going to be put together under the same main point next week. What is the secular approach to community? What are the weaknesses of the secular approach, and what evidence do you see that people lack community? Questions 3 and 4 are basically the same thing. And then question number 5, what is unique about Christianity that we can have community? I hope you guys have been doing some homework on that. I hope to have read 3 books by that time to help me with some of that. I have them all lined up already. I'm almost done with one of them. Okay, any comments or questions on that? Is this approach, this is our 4th time discussing this approach, does this make sense? We deal with basic human needs and get people to think deeply about the poverty of their worldview to give them the things that they need. If you reject God, you're going to have a really hard time finding meaning, identity, a reason to be moral. You're going to have a really hard time finding hope, which is what we're going to talk about tonight, and you're not going to find much of a community. So, any comments or questions on that before we get into our discussion on hope?
Just on like the broader approach, I guess, I think that, like, I've been thinking about like how I would have these kind of conversations with like a coworker or with like a family member, and I think that the same framework can apply. But do you think that like there is a way to have these conversations that is still helpful, but that is less harsh? Does that make any sense? Like, or is it like you gotta like make people uncomfortable? So really, like,
Yeah, so that's a good question. So what we're doing is we're giving like quotes from atheists and skeptics that show their own poverty of their worldview and stuff like that. We're like really getting deep in looking at some of this stuff, and we could even go deeper than we are going. But my hope is that the impact of us going deep on this stuff, like we might not always think it as deeply about all these things as these quotes and these discussions, but that the depth of what we're doing right now leaves an impression where at least we remember certain questions that we could ask. You know what I mean? Because if we just brushed through and went through like a series of a bunch of questions you could ask without looking at the quotes, this maybe wouldn't be as memorable. And so I think it's safe to go like, hey, so like, you know, how's your life been going since you have made these choices? Like, you know, I'm just curious, how have you found a sense of meaning? You know, that kind of thing. And you're at least trying to get people to think through it for themselves. And then if they want to have further discussion about it, then there's room for that. So, all right. Does that make sense, though? Yeah. But I think there's times to say, hey, like, if you want to get together and like talk about some of these things, like some of your own people have said a lot of things that are worth considering here. Okay, so hope. What is hope?
An expectation of things to come.
Yeah, it's what you expect to happen in the future, and it would be like the good things you expect in the future. Like I don't hope that I get to pay my taxes next year. It's one of those like duty sort of things. So hope is like something that would be a positive thing that you have some kind of expectation for in the future. So think of, and by the way, we all live in every present moment in anticipation of the future. You know, like you guys probably all heard we're moving to Bowling Green, Kentucky. And so we are getting our house ready to sell. We're looking at houses that are going to be in that city. And so like we're doing all of that in anticipation that those things are going to happen, right? So we live in the present moment. We're packing up stuff already. So we're living it in the present in anticipation of what's going to happen in the future. All right, so from a bigger perspective about meaning in life and not just like, am I going to move or, you know, what am I going to have for lunch today? Think about this question. What evidences do you see that people today lack hope? Yeah, Tim, and then.
I think one of the big things is, from what I understand, you do surveys and stuff with kids in high school. You do them in the 1950s, every single kid will tell you, yeah, the future's going to be better than today. But just, you know, a lot of kids nowadays, if you think that the future's going to be better, a lot of them will say no. And that's we're starting to ease into a period where less and less people think tomorrow's going to be brighter.
Yeah, so people would affirm that, you know, there's not as much hope for the future, which might manifest itself in different ways. Abby, were you just?
The biggest thing I've always seen is a change in like literature or pop culture.
Yes.
If you look in like pre-World War II or even the 1950s, the future is silver and gleaming,
Yes.
and bright, and everything's better. Nowadays, the future is dystopian and everything's falling apart.
Yes, like George Orwell, 1956 or whatever, sort of right, 1984, he wrote that, I think in 56 it was or something. And then even like a lot of modern movies, like there's been this just deluge of dystopian movies. And now there's not really even any movies being made right now, or if they are, nobody wants to watch them anyways because it's a bunch of garbage. But, I'm sorry, is that offensive? I think it's true though. Okay, so yeah, you see it in kind of like the modern art, but what other evidences do you see today that people lack hope? Yeah, like?
I mean, if you take out some mental issues, suicide
Yeah.
says to me that people today lack hope.
Yeah, suicide rates have been going up. Does anybody happen to know amongst which group of people suicide rates have been going up?
Teenagers.
Teenagers, male or female? Female. Because a lot of it is being social media. Have we talked about the book, The Coddling of the American Mind, by Jonathan Haidt? He wrote a book titled The Coddling of the American Mind, and in it he talks about the effect that social media has had on women. You know, especially women. If you're scrolling through social media all day long, you're seeing a bunch of people post things that are filtered and beautiful and perfect. You're not going to see somebody post a picture of them yelling at their spouse and go, hey, look, like real life moment, raw moment, or whatever. Nobody does that sort of thing. You're only seeing people post like the worst thing or the best things in their life. So if I'm scrolling through that all day long, what am I going to do? I'm going to compare myself to what looks like everybody else has perfection and I don't, so I'm going to be really frustrated by that. So social media, I think, contributes a lot to that. Also, another thing is the depression rates have gone up, the suicide rates kind of accompany that, but also the birth rates. There's more and more people that are interested in having dogs than kids. And so if people don't want to have kids, part of that is, do I really want to bring kids into this world the way that it is and all that kind of. So there's all kinds of evidence that our society is not doing a good job of instilling hope. Yeah, Abby?
This is more of a question. Sorry, I have a question. I'm just trying to think about how to phrase it. So, from my perspective, I feel like you can have hope in God and His promises for our like spiritual salvation, but that doesn't necessarily translate to like hope for this like physical world.
Right, but what we do have is a transcendent hope that even when this crashes, my heart's not totally broken.
Yeah.
It keeps me buoyant.
Okay.
Where I might be sad about some of the things that happen in this world, but I've got something that still transcends all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and that ought to affect us emotionally, you know. But we can still be sad about it. I'm not saying we can't be sad or have any kind of depression or whatever at times. That's not my point. Okay, so clearly our society's not doing a good job of instilling hope, but what are the approaches that the secular worldview has to trying to instill hope? So the first one that you'll find a lot of skeptics and atheists writing about is that, my hope is that whenever I'm gone, I've left the world a better place, which goes back to some of the things we talked about in finding meaning in life and things like this. But Catherine Osmond wrote a book called Grace Without God, where she is doing the antithesis of what we're doing in these classes, where she tries to find meaning and morality and all these things without God. And this is one of the quotes that she had in the book with regards to how she finds hope. You need to tell your kids that you're a secular humanist and tell them what that means. She's doing an interview with a guy at a Claremont Mesa College in San Diego, California. He says, you need to say, we believe in making the world a better place. We believe in evidence over faith. We believe in reason as a way to address problems. We believe in helping others because that's what makes the world a better place for everybody. This is what we believe. All right, so what she says is the way that she's finding hope, the way that she finds some kind of belief that keeps her strong, is to leave the world a better place. Okay. Have you guys heard secular people express that sort of thing, that there might not be a God, there might not be a heaven? In fact, I know there's not. But when we die, I hope that I'll have left the world, I have made some kind of contribution to the world to make it a better place. That's what a lot of people put their hope in. Now, do you think that that's a pretty fair assessment of what a secular person might say? What are the problems with this approach then? So there's a couple things that we'll bring up here. Number one, Freddie DeBoer, he's an atheist. He's probably my favorite living atheist to read from. He's got a blog that is, I think, really worth reading. But Freddie DeBoer said this: what today's social justice politics asks for is a world that's nice, a world that's safe from everyone, for everyone all the time. And of course, this is impossible. The nice world is never coming. Yes, we need to work to make the world a more equitable and humane place. There are certain areas in that domain where progress is possible. But to say, as many now do, that we need to eliminate bullying or even eliminate microaggressions is no less fantastical than saying we need to build spaceships to take us away from this fallen earth. You may as well say we need to eliminate greed or jealousy. These things are part of the basic emotional endowment of being human. People hurt each other out of malice, true, and always will. But much more often they hurt each other because they are clumsy and insensitive creatures by our nature. So what is Freddie DeBoer's point here when somebody says, well, we want to leave the world a better place, we want to make things safe for everybody? What's he saying here? You're never going to do it. Because there's certain things that seem so built into humanity, like greed and anger and things like this, that if you want to say, well, we'll change the systems or we'll do this or that, you're always going to be left with people that have greed and anger and jealousy and all these different things that are going to seep out into whatever society you've tried to construct. So for you to try to think that you're going to leave the world a better place, you might make a small dent in certain areas for a short period of time. But there's no way that you're going to actually make a long-lasting impression. Now, I have the reference to Animal Farm here. Anybody ever read the book Animal Farm by George Orwell? So you guys remember in the book then, is it McGregor is the farmer, or am I mixing it with my kids' storybooks?
I think it's McDonald.
McDonald, yeah. McGregor was the other one with the rabbit that keeps eating. That's a kid's story. So McDonald, yeah. So he's in charge of this farm. And what do the animals do in Animal Farm?
Chase the farmer off.
They chase the farmer off, and then the animals take charge and they take sovereignty over themselves. Who ends up becoming the leaders in Animal Farm? The pigs do. And are they really good leaders? They changed everything systemically, and is everything great now? No, because the pigs end up being pigs, and they take and take and take from the people. As soon as you think that you can change this or change that, guess who comes to leadership anyways? More wicked people. So that's one problem with this world. Yeah.
Can I just say, while you were just describing it, because I read Animal Farm a long time ago and I forgot it.
Okay.
But what you just described is kind of what happened in Seattle, in Chaz Top.
Yeah, that's right.
Because they destroyed the police station.
Right.
And then they set up a perimeter around it.
And then people were dying there. And there were rapes that happened in there.
Dying there. But people were like making rules because now there was this void of leadership, void
Exactly.
of authority. People were making, no, you can't take pictures here. No, you can't
Right.
go over there. No, you can't. But they're part of supposedly the.
Yeah, it
It was
didn't work
against the
out.
authority.
That's a good modern example of that. Very good point. All right, so that's one problem that Freddie DeBoer points out here, that he's just very good writer. Another example of this, or another thing that you can say here about this, is something that H.G. Wells wrote. H.G. Wells wrote a lot of different kinds of stuff. He wrote a long book on the history of the world, and it was really popular, but people wanted him to write a shorter one, so then he wrote a shorter history of the world. And it's interesting when you look at what he wrote before World War II in his short history of the world, and then after World War II, his hope seems to have changed. So before World War II, look what he wrote in 1922. can we, and this is after World War I, so it seems like, oh, we're going to have peace now and all this sort of thing. He says, can we doubt that presently our race will more than realize our boldest imaginations, that it will achieve unity and peace, that it will live, the children of our blood and lives will live, in a world made more splendid and lovely than any palace or garden that we know, going on from strength to strength in an ever-widening circle of adventure and achievement. What man has done, the little triumphs of his present state, and all this history we have told, form but the prelude to the things that man has yet to do. So before World War II, what is H.G. Wells's understanding of the world?
It is going to continue to get better. And
Things are going to get better. So I studied recently with an atheist. He used to be a Christian and he fell away. And there's a Christian that wanted me to reach out to him. He lives in Tennessee. So we started doing some Zoom calls. And he told me that he thinks science is going to get us to a point where it literally eliminates all suffering in all the world. That all diseases, there's going to be some kind of cure for. Like everything that could ever bring pain, science will eventually eliminate. So like this really like upbeat attitude towards the future and things like this. H.G. Wells had a similar kind of perspective that it's onward and we're getting better and greater and smarter and we're advancing in all these different sorts of things. All right, so not too long after that, World War II happens, and what's going on in World War II? Lots of really bad stuff. By the way, this is going to be a really important analogy for anybody today that you study with or that you talk with that really thinks that science and human ingenuity is going to get us to this greater and higher place. Yeah, there's people that have thought that way before, like H.G. Wells, and then a war happened, and then after World War II, he wrote a book called A Mind at the End of Its Tether, which is kind of like, well, the guy's clearly like not emotionally okay. It's a very short book. He doesn't have much to say, but all of these things he expected for the future have been dashed. So he says this towards the end of his life. The cold-blooded massacres of the defenseless, the return of deliberate and organized torture, the return of it, we thought we were done with it, mental torment and fear to a world from which such things had seemed well nigh banished, has come near to breaking my spirit altogether. Homo sapiens, as he has been pleased to call himself, is played out. So, what are some observations you guys have about H.G. Wells's change of heart from before and after World War II? Yeah, lack of hope. What was the thing that God brought about his lack of hope?
Human beings.
Human beings. It's like when people say, I think most people are really good and most people really want to do what's right. Have you ever even spent time with a lot of people? I think the best people I've ever known are Christians, and I think genuine Christians really do want to do good for other people and things like that. But when you start like spending time with a lot of people that don't have that kind of dedication and things like that, you really think most people want to do the right thing? You just haven't gotten out enough or something, I don't know. But yeah, you just wait for some terrible thing to happen, and this hope that you had that we're onward and upward to a better place, it's going to come crashing down. And it's happened in the past. Blake, and then Abby, and then Josh.
Well, it's just like what we've talked about already. Like, I mean, even if most people do want to do the right thing, how do you define what the right thing is?
That's right. You still don't even know what the right thing is.
Usually, from what you talked about, I guess last week or maybe a couple weeks ago.
Last week,
it's what's right for me.
Right.
So that's not necessarily going to be what's right for anyone else or at all. And then also saying most people want to do the right thing, it's like that's in the moment. I think I think it's not just people changed his mind, the circumstances changed his mind. Like, so if you want to do the right thing, maybe that's when it's easy, when you have the luxury of considering options. But when your back's against the wall and circumstances change, do you still want to do the right thing by other people? Like,
right.
I don't. That doesn't seem to be how how history has played out.
No, it's not. Yeah, and that's why there's so many. But whenever I lived in California, why there's so many preppers there? Like, I've never met. You guys know what a prepper is, right? They got a bunch of stuff stocked up, a bunch of guns in their house. They got they make swimming pools in their backyard, not really so they can even swim, but because they want to have a bunch of water when the earthquake happens and all this sort of thing. Like, they're ready, because what they'll tell you is when things go bad, nobody's helping each other. So I gotta help. Abby.
So
book, he died shortly after he wrote this book. And he was just broken because this whole idea, can we leave the world a better place? Is it onward, upward? No. You just wait long enough. There might be a period of a few years where things seem to be, but you just give it enough time and it's going to go to pot. Josh?
I was just gonna say, as the Lord described Israel at the end of Judges, that all of them will be right in their own eyes.
Right.
I think it's fair to say that people will do the right thing in their eyes, otherwise they wouldn't do it. I mean, when somebody punches somebody out of anger, it's because they believe it's the right thing. When somebody cuts somebody off in traffic,
Sure.
it's because they believe it's what they need to do. Our whole society, like, kidnapped the whole race of people under an umbrella of various reasons.
Sure.
You can justify and rationalize things. I think that hope kind of fades. I think it's easy to have that hope when you're surrounded with many people who see the same thing as right in each other's eyes.
That's true, yeah. That's a
So
good point.
once you either age out, or you become separated, or something happens
Yeah.
where you're no longer surrounded by an echo chamber, and you see that people now believe something is right differently than what you believe is right, or you see those hopes clashing, such as in World War II,
Right.
I think it's easier for that hope to fade, because no
For
longer
sure.
are you disillusioned by a whole bunch of people seeing the same thing as right.
Yep. Yeah, you just give enough time. Yep.
You said earlier, or you talked about how people who just like think that they have not spent enough time with other people by thinking that people are doing, are generally good and want to do the right thing. And in the Bible it says in Romans 1:18, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness.
Yep.
And it talks about that like that. And then this is the King James, and then other versions it talks about how who suppress the truth,
That's right.
who don't look at, and it's hard to look at truth that basically we're not good, and on our own we're not going to choose the right thing.
Right.
And but the Bible says, again, hope thou in God. These are only hope, but they've chosen not to because they suppressed it.
I really like the imagery of Romans 1 where it says that they suppress the truth. As if, like, have you ever been in water, like you've got an inner tube thing that you're floating in or whatever, if you try to push it down into the water, it wants to come back up, right? So you have to suppress it. To suppress something means that it wants to come out or wants to come up, and it takes energy to... Why do you think it is when you study with skeptics and atheists that they're so emotional about, I hate God and God's a monster and all this kind of stuff? Because it's trying to come up. This thing that you're kind of built to connect with. So, okay, so H.G. Wells, that you just wait for some traumatic thing to happen in the world and you're going to lose hope in this idea that we're going to leave the world a better place. Here's another thing, I like this one. That this idea that I'm going to leave the world a better place cannot apply to people who are in abject poverty or like real suffering in the world. It can only come from somebody that has a position of privilege in the world. So, I like this quote from Timothy Keller. He says, imagine how ludicrous it would have been to sit down with a group of early 19th century slaves and say, there will never be a judgment day in which wrongdoing will be put to right. There is no future world and life in which your desires will ever be satisfied. This life is all there is. When you die, you simply cease to exist. Our only real hope for a better world lies in improved social policy. Now, with these things in mind, go out there, keep your head high, and live a life of courage and love. Don't give in to despair. Now, if he didn't preface this with who you would say this to, this is a great characterization of what the secular person says. Go out there and love people and make the world a better place. But you go to India and say that to people that have nothing. Go tell that to slaves in the United States in the 18 or 1700s. You think that worldview is going to fly with them? The only reason this kind of approach, I want to leave the world a better place, blah, blah, blah. The only kind of people that would believe that are people that are highly privileged. Any comments or questions on that? All right, so that's the first approach for the secular person, is they want to say, I want to leave the world a better place. There's a second approach to hope for a secular person, and that's ultimately to accept death as a natural part of life, which ties into how you understand what's going to happen to you after you die. So Catherine Osment in that same book, Grace Without God, like one of the climactic parts of the book is when she's like looking out the window and she sees a church building across the street, and then her daughter walks into the room and she goes, "Mommy, what happened to Grandma when she died?" And she has the option, she's looking at the church building going, do I tell her a lie that this church would teach, or do I tell her the reality? So like that, so tense. Okay, so this is what Catherine Osmond said. Our bodies decompose, falling back into the earth, merging with all other matter that makes up our planet. In the future, our decomposed bodies might provide nutrients to the trees. Someone might hang a swing from one of those trees, or sit beneath the shade of its leafy branches, or make a painted horse from its wood. Could you imagine telling an 8-year-old that? What's going to happen to me when I die? Well, that's interesting. You're going to be made into ashes, and then your ashes might feed an oak tree, and somebody might hang a swing on the oak tree, but somebody else might make a baseball bat and kill somebody with that tree. I don't know. You just kind of hope that that they end up doing something good with the tree. But here's the idea: is that my hope is that I kind of like, almost in a Buddhist sense, and like a dewdrop going back to the ocean. I'm like being like absorbed back into the all soul, but there's no God. But it's just kind of like what happens to my dust as I return back to nature, and it kind of becomes part of this circle of life, like you see in The Lion King. Where, remember this conversation where Mufasa, he says, everything you see exists together in delicate balance. As king, you need to understand that balance and respect all creatures, from the crawling ant to the leaping antelope. All right, so, okay, young Simba, you've got to respect everything. And then young Simba asks a really good question. He says, but Dad, don't we eat the antelope? You can imagine the dad going, well, this is what he says. Yes, Simba, but let me explain. When we die, our bodies become grass, and the antelope eat the grass, and so we all are connected in the great circle of life. And there's a song about it. Do you see how Disney is putting that into their messaging? Like, what's your hope? Well, I'm going to die, and then I'll feed. And so my hope is that, my body will end up going back into this beautiful circle of life. So those are the two basic approaches in the secular worldview. The most prominent ones that you'll find in their writings today. I hope to leave the world a better place, and when I die, I get to go into the circle of life. Any comments or questions on those? Yeah.
I'm seeing the aforementioned materialism. You can't say this from a poor perspective. You have to be rich and affluent to say these things.
Yes. Yeah. Do you see why secularism is popular in wealthy countries? I'm sorry. But when people talk about the decline of religion and blah, 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 that is not true in Africa. It's not even true in China. It's not true in India. It's true amongst wealthy people in the United States. And that's not any pointing out anything inherently wrong with wealth, but it is showing that when you've got a lot of it, it blinds you to your real needs.
What did Jesus say?
Yeah, it's easier for the rich man to go through the eye of a camel than to enter the kingdom of God. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's an important kind of drumbeat point to make from this, is that when you're talking with skeptics today, you go, okay, if you were living in India and you had no arms or legs, and you needed, Barry Kurtzville, the guy I trained with, he told me a story about a guy that he met in India who had no legs, and people would carry him and sit him on the side of the road, and Barry said that he had never seen somebody in such destitution. Okay, go out and make the world a better place. You get to be part of the circle of life. You probably will happen pretty soon. Is that good? That does not fly with people who don't have comfort. Because people who don't have comfort they're more aware of their deeper emotional needs, which is what we're trying to do when we discuss these things with skeptics. Good. Any other comments or questions up to this point? All right, yeah.
Well, I think too, for folks that are suffering, it's not very compassionate to look at them and say, well, basically suffering,
Yeah, that's right.
You'll be happy about it.
Well, it's easy for you to say, Mr. American, that's got all these nice things, it's not compassionate at all.
I would think that someone that, so the quote from Catherine Osmond, in the future, our decomposed bodies might provide nutrients to the trees. To your point, what if someone is poor and someone is hungry and they haven't had nutrients in quite a while. Like it's like that doesn't make sense. How is this a circle? Because I'm not
Right.
getting that. So how
That's
am I?
true.
You know what I mean? It's like that doesn't even make sense.
Right.
Like I never thought about it.
And if I haven't had
Standpoint.
nutrients, I guess I'm not going to do very well at helping a tree.
Right, because you think a circle of life is basically equality with
Right.
how things wind up in the long run, but like that all goes away when you think of how there's inequality in our world, and it always has been.
Exactly. Yeah. This doesn't really jive with our intuitions when you really stop and think about it, which is what you're trying to help skeptics do. Richard.
So the leave the world a better place thing, I find that in even most people I know who consider themselves religious,
Yeah.
not even skeptics, but people who like to go to churches and they have their own Bibles, but when you talk to them about what they're trying to accomplish and what their real hope is,
Yes.
they will simply say that their hope is to leave this world better than they came into.
And so I'm going to become a social activist.
Yeah.
And this is really concerning, and this is why Christians need to think more about this stuff. If you can do some earthly good, whatever, that's fine. But that's not where our ultimate hope is. And I think there's too many Christians getting distracted with social activism, politics, whatever. I'm not saying, like, if you're going to be interested in it, be interested in it like you follow a sports team, but don't make it your life passion. I guess some people do that too. I saw a couple of hands, and then I'll get to Abby, and then I thought I saw another one over here. But yeah, like,
I was just gonna say, to Rich's point, I remember when I was in college, I remember a guy saying that about the church that we were going to, and I found that like a really odd thing to say. Be like, my goal is to leave this church better than when I came here. And I'm like, that just sounds strange to me. But at the same time, like I didn't want to hate on it, even though it's very natural for me to hate on things I don't understand.
yeah, you're a contrarian.
Exactly, but it honestly it does kind of expose something about like a little bit of like you think you're so powerful and capable and well why is that even on your radar?
Yeah.
When I guess another way of thinking about it is like yes Jesus did that, but his mindset was serving. So if what you mean is I'm going to serve myself to the bones, then sure, go ahead. But most people that say that, religious or not, they don't. That's not what they do. That's not what they mean.
Right.
They mean they want to be known. They want they want to have a floor, and they want for people to hear them. They don't want to get dirty.
Right. That's good. It happens in religious circles. Abby, and then yeah.
And that's another thing too. Again, as someone who just like naturally bends this way, the last 2 years has been devastating for me because this mindset, you feel responsible for things that are happening that are out of your control because you want to believe you can do something to fix it, or do something to help people, or do something to stop whatever is happening, whether it be in your country or other countries, because everyone is talking about it as if that's something that you can do. And this feeling of powerlessness, especially with access to social media and the news, where you're not even aware of what's happening in your community and the people around you, but in communities all over the world, and just feeling trapped and powerless, while at the same time still believing that there has to be some way that you can help.
Right.
But being unable to find it. You know, I'm still not completely past that, but working on moving myself past that belief that I myself can change not the world, but like stop bad things from happening has been difficult but helpful in order to like have hope to like survive.
Right.
You know, because otherwise, how do you get by? You know, because it's just a constant reminder of your powerlessness.
And this is what Ecclesiastes 3, 1 through 15, the point of that passage, there's a time to laugh, there's a time to cry, there's a time to kill, there's a time to preserve life, there's a time to gather stones, there's a time to throw stones. There's like, I think it's 15 different contrasts. Have I given you my little thought on that passage before? Or was that somewhere else that I did that? Okay. Those are things you can't control. I can't control the times where I have to, see it, Tim, where I have to gather stones and throw stones. Like I can't control when it's appropriate to laugh and cry. Those aren't commands that, oh, I have to laugh right now. No, it's saying that these are circumstances that come crashing in you like waves that you cannot stop. And it's in the same context where he says God's put eternity into our hearts. You know what that means in the context? People will just like pluck that verse out of context and say God's put eternity into our hearts, and so we all have this sense that there must be a heaven and stuff like that. And maybe that's a derivative point that can be made from that, but that's not the point in the context. In the context, he's saying God has allowed this life to have vicissitudes, where there's times to laugh and times to cry, and there's ups and there's downs. But God has built us to want things that are firm and fixed and stable. We want things to be a certain way all the time. God's put eternity into our hearts, that we want things to be fixed. But he doesn't let this life ever be that way so that you fix your eyes on the real hope. That's the point in Ecclesiastes 3. Camilla? All right. Did you have a comment?
Yes.
Yeah.
The secular humanists or whoever, the skepticists, want to make the world a better place, but they think that basically everything's going to just disappear.
Exactly.
So what's the point of making it a better place
Yes.
if everything's going to disappear, if we as human beings and everything we see is just going to disappear?
That's right. I like to use, very good point. I like to use the illustration of an airplane crashing. I've said this before here. But you got an airplane that's about to crash and it's got 5 minutes before it crashes, but it's kind of coasting. And you go to the bathroom and the light's not working in the bathroom, so you complain to the flight attendant person, the light in the bathroom is broken, we got to fix it. Okay, let's spend the last 5 minutes we got to fix this light that's going to end up crashing anyways. Anything that you do to make this world a better place, it's all going to crash and all consciousness is going to end anyways. So what's the point? Josh?
I was going to say this for 3, but since we're talking about it, conversely, the Christian worldview gives that a more positive spin, such as if you know the plane is going to land perfectly no matter what, then you're not worried about making sure that you're the perfect pilot or making sure that everything, you actually have some freedom to do something good. And maybe the analogy I had in my head was like a basketball game, and I play sports, but if I'm playing a basketball game and I know that no matter what, at the end we win this game, I'm going to feel more freedom to share the ball and to be an easier player and to do things on behalf of others. To try to be a decent member of society, to do some good of my job, to see if I can make the world around me a better place for a little bit, because I know that what actually matters is good.
Yeah.
Versus if what's actually coming is nothing but the eventual heat death of the universe. If it's a crashing plane, then it's kind of...
Then eat, drink, and be merry.
Why am I marching? Why am I saying this? Why am I helping this person? Why do anything?
Yeah, and this is, so whenever I study with the skeptics, again, this is why I'm quoting from atheists or respected, because they don't believe in the Bible. They're at the point where they want to start looking at the Bible. This is trying to get them to a point where they want to look at the Bible. But you look at these quotes and you go, have you really thought about this? Have you realized the poverty of your worldview? You think you're all rich and you've got everything really made in your life, but do you see how impoverished you are in your worldview? Over here, then, Camille. Did you have?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so for us as Christians, though, to have a different perspective, we need to keep our, like you said earlier, to keep our focus on heaven. And it says that in the Bible, don't look at things below, look at things above. But also to be concerned with building up the kingdom of heaven here,
Yes,
and the church, and,
yes.
and the people of
Spreading
God.
the gospel is the best good you can do for people.
Well, individually though, lining ourselves up with what the Bible says and believing what the Bible says
Yes.
will, and in community, like we were talking about earlier,
Yes.
building each other up like it says, and ye are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints in the household of God, and are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ being the chief cornerstone.
Ephesians 2.
Yes, and who all the building fitly framed together groweth unto a holy temple in the Lord. So the temple, if we get it together, then the rest of the world benefits.
Yeah, that's right. The kingdom, the reign of God starts with my submission to the king. and then the mutual edification of the saints, that then the world looks at that community and go, there's something different about you, gives them hope that there's a better way of living, which is what we're going to talk about next week with the community. That's a good point. All right, one criticism of this that I just have to accept death as a natural part of life, and I get to feed an oak tree one day. Carl Jung said this about death. Death is indeed a fearful piece of brutality. There is no sense pretending otherwise. It is brutal not only as a physical event, but far more so psychically. A human being is torn away from us, and what remains is the icy stillness of death. There no longer exists any hope of a relationship, for all the bridges have been smashed at one blow. So as long you can tell people, accept death as a natural part of life, and then Carl Jung would say, you can try to think about unicorns and rainbows all day long alongside death, but it goes against all the deepest sensibilities we have about death. Mufasa was wrong. So that those you just kind of have to like kill part of your brain to be okay with saying, oh yeah, when I die, I'll maybe become part of a horse, a little wooden horse for some kid one day, or it could be made into a baseball bat to kill people. I don't know. Like it can go either way. All right. Do you guys see any other problems with just accepting death and just embracing the circle of life thing? Yeah, Camille?
There's no true comfort when someone passes.
Yeah.
Like, you have nothing to, there's no hope.
Yeah.
There's no see you later, there's no, I'll pick you up off the ground with my hand and turn to dirt or something like
Yeah.
that. There's none of that. Let's say you lose a mom suddenly, let's say you lose your mom, and then you're thinking, like, Carl Jung, or worse, think there's nothing else to live for.
Yeah, so when the event actually happens, can you really think what Catherine Osmond thought?
No.
You're really distant. You're isolated from death right now, so it's easy to say what you're saying, but when it actually comes, it's different. Richard and then Blake.
Well, the value of the life that we have either gets lessened or eliminated if you view this accepting death as like, oh, it's just as good. You're an accident anyway.
Right.
So you're going to be part of some accidents after you're dead.
Yeah, the accidents continue.
Right. So your value after you're dead is just as much your value now.
Yeah, yeah.
Suicide, euthanasia, all of these things become way more acceptable.
Right. You see what ends up happening in the society when this gets accepted, Blake in the community.
One problem I see with accepting death, especially in the first quote, is she doesn't have any proof of that. Like, that's faith.
Yes.
It's the circle of life thing. Like, there's no evidence of.
Which would be a point to say, okay, well, why do you believe that?
Yeah.
You think that you're the secular humanist who has all this enlightenment and objective thinking. What's your evidence for that? Or is that a belief system that you can't prove definitively? Every worldview has faith.
Which is why this whole thing is like, where's the hope?
Right. Yep, good. Camille?
I'll be listening and then I'll forget back.
Okay, all right. Well, let's move on to really briefly the biblical approach to hope. So after you've helped people see how impoverished they are in their worldview, then you go, da-da-da, the Bible. So, 1 Corinthians 15, one of the things that it says about hope and death and stuff like this, 1 Corinthians 15, verses 25 and 26, it says, he must reign until he has put all his enemies under his feet. The last enemy to be destroyed is death. What does the Bible say death is? An enemy. It is never, ever just a natural, beautiful part of life. How many Christians have you heard say things like that, though? The Bible says it's an enemy. So we should always think about it that way. It's an intruder. Yeah.
So what about sin? Like, let's say you're someone who just has mixed stuff in their life, but you look at it as a whole, because you're a Christian, because of the freedom. Like, what would you say?
What?
Well, obviously that doesn't like, if someone has a mixed stuff in their life,
Yeah.
but they are a Christian,
Okay.
and their hope is, die so they can, be free from the substance of this world.
Right.
How would that scripture apply to that?
Yes. Okay. So for the Christian that is suffering immensely, like, would they be okay dying? Like, I get together with Sewell every week, and he says that he's ready to go, but the moment of death is an intruder. How it happens is the scary thing. What happens after the event, we're promised peace. The event of death is still an enemy. So yeah, that's how I would answer that. We have hope after death. So there is good for the Christian because of where our hope is. But the event of it is always a brutal thing, like Carl Jung. So I agree with Carl Jung on that one. So first of all, the Bible affirms our sensibilities that there's just it feels like an intruder. The Bible agrees with your intuitions on that. But then also 1 Thessalonians 4 verses 16 and 17. The Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command, with the voice of an archangel, and with the sound of a trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so we will always be with the Lord. So in Buddhism or pantheistic religions, when you die, again, you go into the all soul. You were an individual for a time, but then you get swallowed up into the ocean and you're a dewdrop going back into the ocean, so you lose your individuality. The Christian worldview teaches that when you die, you still get to be you. We who are caught up together will be with him in the clouds, and we're going to be with the other ones who were dead in Christ. You maintain your individuality, but you're perfected now. Because Revelation says that no unclean thing will enter, that he's going to perfect us totally and all this sort of thing. So you still get to be you, but perfected, but you get to be with other people that have passed on. So we don't grieve as the world grieves over the death of a Christian. But ultimately, who do you get to be with in verse 17?
Right.
With the Lord. Now, I don't think what people want is just consciousness after death, because that's what hell is, consciousness after death, right? People don't just want, there's a sense in which everybody has life after death, right? You have consciousness, you're alive in some capacity after death. What you want is love after death. And Jesus is the source of all love. The sun, the literal sun, is where light emanates from. All the love in the world has emanated from God. And anybody that shows love had that idea from God because God demonstrated it to them, things like that. And so you get to be with the God of all love forever. All right, so in thinking about it, this whole discussion tonight, what is better about the Christian approach to hope? Yeah.
Solomon talks about in Ecclesiastes in his vanity skills how it's all it's all going to be vanity anyway. So enjoy the work of your hands. To upgrade that a little bit with the Christian hope, because the hope is there. All that we do here can be used for good. It can be used for bringing others to Christ.
Yep.
It can be used for going about doing good works as the Lord did.
Yep.
There's a reason. There's a hope. It's not all vanity, because you're not underneath the sun.
That's right. Good. It's not all.
You win the game at the end.
That's right. Good. Yeah, Richard?
It's not founded on humans.
Yeah, it's not founded on humans. And we don't do a good job with many things. And so it's more firm and fixed.
Well, we have no power.
Right.
We have no power in 5 minutes from now, or 5 seconds from now.
Right.
You can't stop what we do in the future. So how can we be a source of hope? It's ridiculous.
Yep. Good. Anything else? All right. Well, you guys bring the heat next week on our need for community. I'll have some things, but probably what I bring is not going to be as densely packed as these other classes have been, because I am expecting you guys to bring in some homework and then give me your research so that I can copy it and take it for other studies that I do. So, thanks, guys.
Richard, would you mind closing us out with the prayer? Lindsay mentioned that the teacher training class that was supposed to be on Sunday is going to be postponed, by the way, so just for everybody's reference on that.
Let's pray. Our Holy Father in heaven, we thank you so much for this time we've had to spend in consideration of the world in which we live and the people that we want to reach out to on your behalf. The reason that you have left us here to encourage one another and to